aspect, in terms of the efficient distribution or allocation of these energy technologies in providing energy access for Africans?
Okay, so my answer to that is it's not technology, it's the institutions. It's the way we think about energy. It's thought about big projects. Big projects allow big handouts. We've got to think of ways where we do smaller projects where, I talk about the 4 Ds of energy. It's decentralization, so it's much more smaller, decentralized generation. It's digitization, so it's smarter, it's more cleverer. It's decarbonization, so it's low energy. The most important one is the 4th one, it's democratization of energy. If you look at the large power plants, they always produce energy in areas which are poor to provide energy for the rich. No matter which country you're in, it always does that. Whereas the new Ds allows you to have the energy generation for the local people, for the local benefit. And that is an enabler for other things to happen. So I don't think it's a technology. I mean, what other product do you know of that 10 years ago was $4,000, today is $24? That's the cost of a kilowatt of solar panels. 10 years ago it was $4,000, today it's $24. Wow. Next year it's probably going to be $20. Okay, so that's not the problem.
I think that really brings to reality who is addressing the problem, because Africa's response to energy needs has always been a middle class response. So Kenya Power and Lighting doesn't give us the power that we need. We buy generators. We could afford to buy generators. I mean, Nigeria, I don't know if I want to ask. It's running on generators as we speak. So what does that mean? Is their response is for themselves, but not necessarily for the country as a whole. So, the fact is, solar energy became cheaper because it became an issue for everyone. Everyone needed to start accessing solar panels. If you were building a house 10 years ago, you couldn't afford to put solar panels. Kenya now, the law is you actually have to put solar panels for water heating in all your houses before you can get approved. Although getting approval is interesting in terms of I'll take a question.
I have a question. I want to just go back a little bit to the teaching research question, because I think it's interesting for the people in the group who are just having a conversation about, teaching 300 people in a class and all this. And I'm conflicted because on one end, postdoctoral fellowship schemes and all these things want to buy out teaching time from people so that they can concentrate on building research careers. And at the same time, we're complaining that the higher education teaching side don't have the information from this, from the research, and it's not as up to date, and the researchers are not engaged with the higher education, with the teaching side of it. So where is the balance, and what are we missing in developing, career pathways for researchers in the continent? Anybody really?
Sorry, one of the problems in this country and in Oxford is that we are very much rewarded by research granting publications in high impact journals. This is wrong. I think everyone who considers themselves an academic must teach. And there is a responsibility, I think, in spending a certain percent of your time doing outreach. You learn so much from talking to people, and one of the pleasures of teaching is what you learn from the people who you are teaching. And it's got to be a dialogue. It's not going to be telling people what to do and what to believe or anything like that. It's to be engaged in a dialogue. And I personally have done that all my life, and I think that should be a responsibility of anyone who's an academic. Also running courses and welcoming school teachers in with very simple experiments. When we were teaching our journalists in Africa, most journalists are very poorly paid, they know very little about agriculture, but most of their clientele, many of them, because I run the newswire, so I see what's published in Africa every week, we taught them how to isolate DNA. Most of them had never done an experiment and didn't know what an experiment was, didn't know what DNA was. DNA is rather important, both in agriculture and in all the other things we've talked about today. So responsibility, and I think it should be part of your terms of employment.
I'll allow Sandy to respond to that, but maybe I didn't introduce myself. One of the things I think about a lot is capacity strengthening and building research capacity strengthening. And I've been talking about the fact that in countries like Kenya, most of the good research is not in academia. And that's a huge problem because the people teaching or training are not within the academic institution. So we need to bridge that gap, and desperately need to do it very quickly. It's only happening in South Africa maybe, and in Northern Africa that happens, but in many countries in East and Central Africa, the universities, their output in terms of research is a lot lower than it is from research institutions. So that means the researchers who are engaged are not actually teaching. Sandy, and I can see Tolu wants to argue with you, this is great.
I also think we really need to make use of internet technology because the way in which we can interact is so much cheaper and much more economical and much more lively. And for example, in the Oxford Human Rights Hub, that's been one of our key missions, which is to use the internet as a free and accessible way of collaborating and creating conversations between human rights lawyers and specialist practitioners in an interdisciplinary way as well, which means that actually at a very low cost we can bring very high quality research together with it can be horizontal between different people in lots of different countries. We have contributors. It's also our responsibility to move beyond the traditional means of teaching and pedagogy to including all the things that we now have. We have blogging, we have podcasts, we have video interviews, we have even online meetings and so on, which it's just a matter of putting the effort into.
Before Tolu goes there, because I do know a lot of your affiliates are doing some engagement in terms of school. How many of you actually do some school engagement programs, both at university and high school? Just to get a sense of actually how much engagement we have. So it is a good number of people here in the room who actually think it's important that we start engaging within the community. Tolu?
It's a biased sample because that's how you got selected. But I just want to pick up on the point about the disincentives within the academic environment. I think that's an important one. And just pivot from that to talk about something more fundamental, which is the skill sets for science and what we mean by that. Because fundamentally, dumping the biggest course with the largest number of people onto the postdoc is not teaching you anything about teaching, right? What are the skill sets that we think, that we say scientists should have beyond doing research? We need to stop thinking about research as the only thing that if you can do research, then you're a scientist, anything else, you fail. So what are we doing in terms of communicating science, in terms of the way we think about teaching and transferring our knowledge in that way? Do we consider that from a science and academic environment as core skills for the academic endeavor? And I don't think that we do. Because the first step is to recognize that we do, and the second step is to make that a core part of the kind of training that we give to scientists.
I think Julie wants to add on that, and it is a question we keep asking ourselves: what's a research leader? I think one who can teach and actually train other people is going to be a leader.
And then I was just thinking of to bring it home a little bit more, even as the affiliates program, you're in this program to develop as a leader in science. So this distinguishes you from being a good scientist. All of you are good scientists. And for the program, we cherry pick the good scientists. So what is the difference? And I often like to compare this with natural systems. As a parent, when you teach, your idea is for your offspring to be better and more equipped than you are. So your distinguishment in that way, as a parent, you're distinguished as a good parent by how better than you your children are. So even you as scientists, if you're not growing and you're not producing more powerful, even in the food chain, the biology removes you from there. This is not a good product. So think of it and what your role is being here. You must make it different. You must make it better for the next generation. You must develop them to think and to be able to survive in a more difficult world, a more competitive world, and in a better way and to do it efficiently. So your challenge is much greater than you thought before.
And I like the fact that the education aspect is coming out as you speak. Do we have more questions? And please introduce yourself just for the panelists.
My name is Lucy from Kenya. My question is on, to Sandy on human rights. I just would like you to comment on two aspects. One, that the boy child or the men's rights have also been left out in pursuit of gender equality. Two, that governments perceive human rights activists as a nuisance, they don't take them as giving positive feedback. Please can you comment on that?
I think that's a great question. Hopefully will help.
Well, yes, that's a great question. I think the point about gender is it's about relationships between men and women. It's about changing those relationships. It's not about women's rights as against men's rights, etc. It's about gender and the relationships between men and women, which is why in terms of reproductive health, I think it's extremely important for men and boys to be part of it. It's about, it's a collaborative enterprise between men and women. And I don't think we need to say that, particularly around here, that women, men and boys' rights need to be ignored. They should not. They should be part of the reshaping of gender relationships. The redistribution of unpaid work, of parental responsibility is actually something which everyone benefits from, and I think for men as well, parenting is a valuable and it's an extraordinarily valuable thing which everybody should participate in. So I think it would be wrong to dichotomize in those ways. Human rights activists as being seen as a nuisance, well, that's the nature of human rights. They challenge governments. Governments don't necessarily like human rights because they are being called to account. Obviously, you can't be so adversarial that you spoil your ability to influence policy. So in one sense, it is constraining of policy, and many governments don't like it. In another sense, it is also up to all of us to find ways of really having an impact on policy through recognizing that actually human rights are good for everyone. People's civil and political rights in terms of their participation in democracy also improve their socioeconomic rights, and the idea of human rights as being unpalatable doesn't have to be like that, although it does have to be challenging, otherwise we won't be doing our job in the end.
Yeah, and I think that activists get a bad name because historically many of them have not used evidence. And this is where the linkages between what we do and what activism should be is evidence-based activism. If you give information and you give data, we were talking earlier at tea break about unsafe abortion and how many girls die out of it and the morbidity out of that. If you give it as evidence that you are never ever going to solve maternal mortality, that many girls, actually the highest killer of girls in low and middle income countries is as a result of maternal mortality. If you give that type of evidence, then someone will listen. But if all you're doing is making noise with no evidence, which is what we're not advocating for, then you're really not gonna, you keep having that bad label of noisemakers with no evidence. Questions, please?
Okay, so I just want to follow up from there. When you talk about my body, my choice, for example, in the context of marriage, and you say that yeah, I was afraid that I'll be. But let me ask anyway. I'm going to choose my words very carefully. So you say, well, I decide when to have a baby, how many I should have it, and nobody should interfere. Not the health, not even the husband, but I decide. But when the baby is born, it's a shared responsibility. You say that if I had decided to do a postdoc, and you have also decided to get a baby without my knowledge, and then you say, all of a sudden, I should stop everything. Don't you think there has to be mutual understanding and agreement? How can two people work together without first agreeing?
I think that's a really good perspective. I will now send you to respond
Okay, so I abuse my rights. The mic. Is that okay? Okay. Just to answer that, I think it does need to be a decision that is made by the person who must carry that, who must also face threats of kind of. I mean, it's unpopular. Can I finish my point? You were given the mic, and I think it's my turn now. So, I mean, me speaking has a lot to do with who gets to speak in a room, right? So even when we're discussing SDGs, who does the speaking? Who does the support work in the back, and whose research is actually valued at the end of the day? So I'm glad that the panel looks this way. And that we're challenging it already. But I think also in the audience, there needs to be kind of a cognizance that we all come from different contexts, but also that we are gendered differently. And the fact that the pressure, whenever childbirth or the issue of children comes up, it's always about blaming the other for bringing a burden upon someone. I think My Body, My Choice is about women having agency to decide. It takes two people to make a baby. I mean, maybe one and some sperm, that you can buy these days. But the reality is that there is shared responsibility, but there's also agency.
Yeah. I'm gonna allow for other questions to continue that discussion.
I also have a question.
I'll give others a chance and then we'll come back to the question. But maybe allow Sandy or Tony to address that issue.
I just wanted to make a comment on that. And that is one of unnecessary dichotomizing, right? Actually, two comments. One, and the second is around cognizance in power and balance, right? So I'm going to give a completely unrelated example, just to highlight the point. In the US, with the issues around Black Lives Matter, and everyone says, but all lives matter. It's like, well, no one is saying all lives don't matter. But by saying Black Lives Matter, we're recognizing that there is a power imbalance at the moment that means that certain lives are more vulnerable than others. And that is how I see and interpret that term, My Body, My Choice. It's not a dichotomy, is in my choice, absolutely, I'm not listening to anything. We have relationships, but it is recognizing that there is currently, and it's not individual. I think it's important, we're scientists, that we don't take what we see as, yeah, but I don't think that. No, it's a general. In general, there is a power imbalance in gender relationships. And you need something that highlights that fact. And so by saying My Body, My Choice, we're not saying that my choice and therefore nothing else must be said about it. But all it's doing is highlighting that for millennia, the balance has been my body, absolutely no choice whatsoever. And in order to correct that imbalance, we have to highlight the fact that there is a...
Just to entirely endorse that by saying that what we're talking about when we talk about choice is when women do not have the choice. It's crucial to contextualize that so many of these issues arise when women do not have the choice. So by saying, well, it's men that may not have the choice if a woman forces a baby on a man, that is one example, but it's not the problem. The problem is that when women do not have the choice. And that is why we say our bodies, our choice. We really need to contextualize when we talk about equality. Equality has to work with the problem that exists. And the problem, as Owen put it so well, is that through now, as much as through the generation, there are so many women who do not have the choice. And biology requires people to be able to control their reproduction, which in many ways has not been men's problem over all these years. We have to remember that.
Great. We'll take a couple of questions. We don't have them. We're actually running out of time.
Thank you so much. My question is very simple. Please, what is the role of traditional medicine in creating sustainable health in Africa, looking at the context of cultural inclinations of African people to traditional medicine? I'll give you a clear example. PILE is a common disease in some African states, and you see people around, maybe possibly sitting down, walking, and then the traditional tribal medical practitioner was passing, and people stopped her to collect local gene agbo in Nigeria. So I think that thing keeps increasing. So what do you think of the context in your own research? And my second question, I'm sorry please for asking two questions, on climate change. For the first quarter of this year, there is international news on clashes between herdsmen and farmers in Nigeria. And actually, that's gone a long way. So whereby many lives have been lost and insecurity being very threatening the country existence in North Central Nigeria. And I want to ask you, Dr. Judy, do you really think the clashes between herdsmen and farmers is an impact of climate change? If there is impact of climate change in this context, how can we solve these issues, these knotty issues of pastoralists and the farmers? You know, when you look at the way they farm, they eat their grasses, these people say, no, it's not, it's our land, this kind of issues. I'm very sure those people have not enough grasses to feed the animals, and these people that has farms, they say, no, we are farmers. Is it a collection of what it did do climate change has an impact in this context? Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Two great questions, Tony. Traditional medicine.
I'm going to split your question into two components, because I think traditional medicine is not one thing. There's an umbrella term, but I see it as having two clear components. One is around indigenous knowledge, and one is around the social-cultural role that holders of the role that people play in society. So the first, I think that there has been a shunning of some indigenous knowledge because it's not necessarily science that has been pursued. I think that is changing very slowly, but it is changing. And I think that given the change, there's an opportunity for due recognition and ownership of the source of that knowledge, and due benefit to ensure that where the knowledge is acquired, that the populations are able to benefit from that. So that's one aspect of indigenous knowledge that I think is critical. I disaggregate them because sometimes it's masked into this, traditional medicine is masked as this whole thing that is not scientific, and there's two components. The other component is around the socio-cultural role. And that is more to do with the people that play that role in society and not necessarily the practice, so I'm separating it. So irrespective of what we know or don't know about the practice and the scientific or lack thereof basis behind them, it's important that we recognize the important role that they play, that people like that play in society. I'll give you an example. In South Africa, we had, looking at TB and ways of controlling TB, right? So the instinct to shun, people just need to go on TB treatment, be screened for TB, people going to traditional healers, that's a waste of time, that neglects the fact that people go to traditional healers. And when the approach was changed to pull in and train traditional healers to recognize the signs of TB and to say, I'm doing my craft and whatever it is I do, but I recognize that you need to go to your clinic. And the reality is, across a lot of Africa, is not one or the other. A lot of people experience medicine and healing in different ways. And there's a psychological and there is a mental well-being component of healing that I think we would do ourselves a disservice to ignoring. So it's important that we pull people in and recognize the important role that they play in society.
Great. And Judy, tribal clashes and climate change.
Yeah, I think what you raised for me highlights two important things. Firstly, what effect inequality has. You know, the system always breaks down whenever there's inequality in a home. Women, people's rights being infringed on. You know, and again, what you're talking about, the inequality in that situation there. Who feels they have the rights over that land? Systems break down, and as scientists, we need to be there, you know, there to make sure we understand where all this is coming from. Then on the other hand, we have to be very careful about attributing things, you know, like an interest is saying, this is because of climate change. You know, I can't pretend that I know whether this is a climate change issue. We do know that if there's inequality in land, there's inequality in food sources, there will be fights. Obviously, if there's a place that's dry and grazers want to go in a place where they can find a place to graze, the people who live there will be upset by what's happening. But what it really does highlight is that we need to have that information. Let us look at the data before you start saying that this is climate change or this is because of political issues. And then also the fact that we have a role in policies. There must be policies about how people use land, policies about how we take care of our environment, policies about how people move, so that, you know, our people are aware, you know. Again, everything is linked. Where does the education come in? How do you teach people that this, you can't just behave this way to somebody else? I mean, we're all connected in the way that if you start pulling the thread of your sweater, the whole sweater disappears. You know, we're all connected in that way. So addressing questions even in an interdisciplinary way, like what is going on, what is the climate, or what is happening in those two communities, and why are they fighting about land? There must be some injustices somewhere. There's possibly also some, you know, lack of policies in place to tell them that this is where you should place and things like that. I don't know whether that addresses your question. You know, but what I'm really saying is it's very difficult to just say, oh, this is because of that, and this is why you're educated to ask those questions.
Yes, I monitor some of the challenges facing agriculture, and I said most are smallholder farmers. They have a couple of acres, they're feeding themselves, and it's women. So one of the major challenges this year in Africa is drought. It's having a dramatic effect. The other is something called the fall armyworm, which is a pest which is coming in and destroying crops. So that's calorific nutrition. What is ignored, which has an impact on other things, is micronutrient deficiency. Vitamin A, iron, iodine, and so on. This affects the very high level infant mortality before the age of 5 is because of micronutrient deficiency. The development during pregnancy, women, neurodevelopment and others, is very much affected by micronutrient deficiency. This is a hidden hunger which has a dramatic effect on women and farmers in Africa, and that's something one's got to pay attention to. It's not just calories, it's micronutrients, and that's got to be addressed.
I'm going to allow for one more question and then we'll have some closing.
Okay. So I just want to say, I have one question actually, and two quick statements about the academy. The first question is, when you talk about the future of food, usually there's reference to GMOs. I think that's something that didn't quite come out clearly, and I'd like to get some information on that. The second thing was, Tolu, thank you so much about talking about dichotomy and the way we usually think about things in the binary. So even when we think about gender, it's not gender alone. Sometimes you'll hear the conversation of developing, developed. We were talking about that yesterday, you know, north, south. And I mean, when we talk about gender, we talk about women in STEM, and even at the academy, we're going into a discussion, and I think this is a platform for which the affiliates can bring in their input, and it's really wanted. we want people to begin to talk about not just women in STEM, you know, let's talk about gender in STEM. How do we involve men? You know, some of you are male professors and you have interns under you. How do you involve women in your research? How are you cognizant to, you know, this is a young female, she's coming in through the research career pathway, she might want to have a baby at some point. Do you have structures and systems that allow for this to happen? So that conversation is open. And the other thing is, I was just going to say, I mean, my brother asked the question I was going to ask about the indigenous knowledge. We saw from Professor Abahanu yesterday's presentation, Abagaz, sorry, he was talking about indigenous knowledge. I think it's something we need to begin to think about, even when we're talking about research. How are you involving that indigenous knowledge that is there, that exists? Because, and you will see this in my presentation tomorrow when it comes to communication, is your research is not for you as an individual. You're doing it within a community, within a society. You have to take it back. And when you take it back, you expect people to take in the information that you have. If it's not contextualized, if you're not maybe even paying attention to the evidence on the ground, then even when we talk about sustainability, there's a layer of people need to appreciate the knowledge that you're bringing and how does that work within their own locality. So even when you're doing your presentation, I think it's always good to have that background of what's indigenous, what's the context in which your research is happening.
Thank you, Juliet. Now I'm going to be strict again. It was 15 words and a question. So unless you have a question that is less than 15 words, I'm going to allow for two, one here and at the back at the top. Two questions before we close, and everyone's available. I know we all want to ask many questions. Some of us have comments, questions. Juliet's going to speak tomorrow. She has a chance to tell you more.
I'll make it 14 words.
Hold on. Okay, thank you. I'm Zahra Abdi, researcher from Tunisia. I will relay on the subject of human rights with Professor Sandy. Especially, I put the light on women and human rights because I believe that a woman never can be a scientist even if she not guaranteed to take her basic human rights like healthcare, maternal and well-being care, and feel free, when she feels free in her body and her mind. And you mentioned CEDAW Convention. And I want to know how many countries in Africa have agreed to sign this convention and to adhere to this article, and how we can do to improve engagement of African government in this convention. Thank you.
We'll take the second question and then we'll answer both. Go ahead.
Okay, my question relates to Africa and our acceptance of SDGs, perhaps uncritical. I will just cite two statistics, life expectancy and GDP, comparing sub-Saharan Africa in 2018 today and the UK in 1950. Life expectancy in the UK in 1950 was 69 years at birth. In sub-Saharan Africa today, it is 60 years. GDP per capita in the UK in 1950 was $1,160. In sub-Saharan Africa today, it is 1.1. So there's a gap of about 16 years and we are hardly anywhere to catch up. My question then is that how have we not uncritically accepted these SDGs as Africans as a path to development? Historically, no country has achieved a high standard of living by the way that we're proposing for Africa. The real issue, I think, about development is about power relations, about trade and everything else. So us as Africans accepting these SDGs as a path for our development, are we not losing focus on the fundamental issues which are going to lead us to a better life? What is the point, for example, of having proclamations about rights to reproductive health, obstetric care, if there are no resources to deliver on those rights? So in short, are we not uncritically accepting these SDGs as Africans? Historically, no country has developed through this way that we're proposing.
Okay, thank you. So the first question was around the Sandy.
So yes, thank you for that question. You're absolutely right that for women it's a lifetime issue. when we think about reproductive justice, we also have to think about work, being able to be protected from pregnancy dismissal at work. There are still enormous numbers of violations of the right at work, sexual harassment, violence at work, etc. So I very much agree. You asked about CEDAW and how many countries in Africa have ratified. Actually, CEDAW is the most widely ratified convention in the world, and almost all the countries in the world have ratified it, including in Africa. The real problem with CEDAW is that you do have a right to enter what's called a reservation, which means that at the same time as being the most highly ratified, it also has the highest number of reservations. And that, the article that I put up, Article 5 on changing culture, is one of the ones that's got most reservations, particularly because of religion. And so there is still the issue of gender equality in religion that permeates many countries, and there are, particularly in North Africa, a very large number of reservations of that article. So that is the issue. On the other hand, if you ratify the convention, you still have an obligation every year, every 2 or 3 years, to revisit those reservations and to remove them when and if possible. So what can we do? What can we do to achieve them? Well, there are many ways actually. The countries have to put in periodic reports every few years, and now there is a great movement of civil society to produce a shadow report. So you can mobilize around it. There's human rights are top-down and bottom-up. Human rights can be a great advocacy tool. If you can tell your government you have ratified this but you haven't done it, then it's in itself an advocacy tool. If you can put people together to bring the evidence together, as you say, into a shadow report and bring it to the CEDAW committee, you will be heard, and then that could well get into the recommendations which go back to the country. So there are many avenues for engagement, for using rights as means of collective action on the ground, up and down. And then, of course, there's the African Women's Protocol. There are lots of other African-based ways in which we can mobilize human rights. Just very quickly on the second question on, it's all very well to talk about obstetric services and so on. Actually, averting maternal mortality is one of the most affordable medical interventions. You can reduce, as I said, you can reduce maternal mortality with providing skilled birth assistance at the backup of emergency obstetric care at very affordable means. So again, as you said, it's about the implementation. It isn't really about resources. And if we think about the cost, how can we say we can't afford to make these interventions when so many women are dying? What about the cost in life, the cost to the women, the cost to the families, the cost to the children? So when we're thinking about cost, we can't only think about the resources coming out of government. We have to think about the cost to the individual of not doing it, and that cost is enormous, and I think unacceptable.
Okay, so starting from Malcolm as we close, I'm going to try and reframe your question a bit in terms of how do individual countries implement the SDGs? Because I think that's the problem, is the capacity to implement the SDGs based on our own needs. So what types of capacities, what type of education is lacking? How do we actually achieve different SDGs? I know I've kind of changed what I really think about, but I think that really addresses the issue is that SDGs are not, we're not supposed to be just slapping them on and saying this is what we do, and the indicators are not necessarily suitable for every country, but actually every country is supposed to find their own indicators and look at the processes that would help them achieve them. So what do you think that would be in terms of capacities, the workforce? How do we actually get there?
What a question to ask. I'm going to answer it in two ways. The first way is each country has to work out for itself what is the best it can be. I don't want to see lots of Americas. I want to see lots of great countries in Africa. I mean, what you don't realize is that when you cut me open, you look at my heart, it says made in Africa. Okay, even though I'm with the wrong colour and I speak funny and all the rest of it, I'm still born in Johannesburg and I'm from Africa and a deep in Kashmir. We've got to think about what is the best thing that we can have for Africa. And then we've got to say, what is the step we can take in front of each one of us? And then, for me, the most important piece is to say, if you look around your colleagues and your people around you, how can you help them make the best step? And that way, we can gradually walk forward together. But if we try and change lots of people all the time, it's really difficult. But the people next to us, we can change. We can bring along with us. And here's a wonderful collection of people to create that network effect.
Thanks. I want to pick up the second point you made about power imbalances. I think it is an important point in terms of thinking about agenda driving the agenda setting. That there is a point to be made around, on the global perspective, who is driving the agenda and for whom. So just to recognize that point that you made. And in doing so, to then pick up on your point to say, even in the best case scenario, when we or one as a country is driving one's agenda, what is that? So can we say, what is our priority? What kind of country do we want to be? What kind of values do we want to embrace? And what is the vision that we see for ourselves? One of the interesting things about the SDGs, so one of my active projects at the moment is looking at meso and macro level approaches to diet and physical activity, and looking at all the global policy documents that have been put into place to think about how to actively implement policy. The SDGs are largely goals, and somebody mentioned earlier, and things that we should measure. The how-tos are actually really missing. So I don't think there is an excuse at the moment to say the SDGs are forcing us to do something. The SDGs are just goals that, can you argue with, is there any country that doesn't want to improve health and well-being, SDG 3? They're actually so superficial and so broad that the question that we must get to is how, and not necessarily then say, oh well, it's already been driven by SDGs, so then it might as well be this person telling me what to do. That is the missed opportunity. To say, how can we think about what are the different things we want to drive? How can we understand the system within our countries and how those systems interact? And how can we then look to address them in efficient ways, not just in 4-year political cycles, but understanding the opportunity cost of not addressing certain things in the long term. So I think about health and we think, well, we can't afford to do A, B, and C. We can't afford to do it in 20 years now, and 20 years down the line and not address them now. We really can't afford not to. So how can we own the things that we do have control over? And what Judy mentioned about being in those spaces, being in those global spaces, to actually make that change and try to shift that balance, both in terms of political balance and globally, but also in knowledge generation. And that is, I think, is the opportunity for the affiliates and for everyone in this room to look at, firstly, how am I shifting the imbalance in knowledge generation? Secondly, what are the skill sets I would need to have, me or my group, in order to meaningfully engage in a way that changes the way things are being done now? So I think those are the things that we need to think.
Great talk, Sandy.
Thanks. Just to add to what's been said, when we say the country needs to decide, we've also got to pay attention to who in the country and to the power imbalances inside the country, and make sure that this discussion is, as you said, democratized. There isn't necessarily a single approach. There's there's huge amounts of power imbalance and maldistribution of resources within countries. And that's why, again, when we say, can a country not afford it, it's really who is making the decisions within the country about distribution of resources. So I think the SDGs they're a mobilizing opportunity. They're an opportunity rather than a position. They're an opportunity for people on the ground to be able to say, this is what we are entitled to, which is why I think the human rights approach can be very useful actually the SDGs reflect a lot of human rights commitments which countries have already made years ago and are not actually implementing. So the point about capacity building is really crucial, about sharing our knowledge, about giving people the means and the mechanisms to articulate and voice what their needs are, and they're often, as we see, extremely pressing, but it gives them a platform and a stage to make their voices louder than they are right now.
My take on the SDGs, I think we need to think of the SDGs relate to sustainability, and however you define it for yourself, it's about the future. You know, how is this going to continue? How is life going to continue? How society is going to be able to continue in the future? The dates that come with the SDGs, those are fluid. The SDGs used to be the MDGs, remember that. And when the target year for the SDG comes and all these targets are not achieved yet, we'll pick up the goalpost and place it further ahead. So the responsibility at the country level is to make sure that whatever you put in place is discussed. Remember, we said that nobody in Africa was sitting around the table when the priorities for SDGs were put across. And then on top of that, there's just so many things. You know, you cannot realistically hope to achieve every single thing under those 17 different headings. So it's as even scientists, politicians, you know, talk, have a communication with the politics, with the politicians, and the people who have the money at your level to make a difference with something, and just focus on that. Base it upon evidence. A lot of it is not based upon evidence. There's a tendency to say, okay, the goalpost is over there, let's start running. Then you get there, and then you're asking your neighbor, oh, what game were you playing? Is this the same game we're playing? So let's define what the game is. What is the prize at the end? You know, why is this one a better game for us to play rather than that one? Do we have skills in cricket? No, let's let the British play that. We play soccer.
They're horrible at it.
We do have a skill. So
let's get the Indians.
Before we get up and start running, sitting down and thinking, as a continent, what is it that we want to do? And is 2030 our goal, or do we have a more, you know, because the goals are just for, you know, let's sit back and evaluate. Let's have a drink and think, how well have we done? But we may want to have a goal and say, we want equality, we want equality for people next year, you know, we want this, you know, so also just consider that.
I'm probably the least qualified person to talk. I've visited a number of countries in Africa. I've got to know and make friends with a number of Africans, so I've learned a lot. I think the people who are letting us down are politicians.
Yes.
And in the countries I've been to in Africa, I've formed an opinion, which I won't share with you. But I say, and I can't speak. Our politicians are letting us down in this country at the moment. In America, God help us, I've lived there. They're certainly letting us down, and I'm ashamed of them. I think evidence is important. We're moving very fast. New technologies, we've heard, I think, and from my experience, particularly in food, and feeding people in Africa is still number one as far as I'm concerned. The mobile phone has been a dramatic modern invention. And a lot of people who made money out of mobile phones in Africa have now moved on to doing other things, like getting involved in feeding people. I think appropriate solutions, and you've got to have a science-based evidence. If you don't like knowledge, try ignorance. And what really worries me is, with any new technology, you've got to find appropriate solutions which can solve them. And you were talking about GM crops and things like that. We can get into a debate about that. But, you know, the move on genomic medicine, genomic food production and things like this, it's all important. But the people who pay for that or fail to pay for that, the people who prioritise that are politicians. And if we get the politicians we deserve, in Parliament at the moment we have a few medics, we do not have a scientist in this country out of 630 odd. You need evidence-based, you need politicians who can communicate and don't just want to be re-elected or not, as the case may be in a few years.
Okay, great. I think that was a really nice point to close at. I want to thank our panelists. They've been great. It's been a whole morning of really having them engage with us. I want to take that as a soundbite. We need to educate ourselves, all the publics, from the politicians, especially the politicians. But politicians are only gonna pay attention to those who vote. So as scientists, we also need to reach the general public that influences the politicians. So it's really important for us to think about that when we're building our programs, when we're thinking about higher education and how we change our programs. Who are we addressing? I want to give a round of applause for
a big thank you also to a very effective moderator, Blendita. Yeah. So a couple of just quick housekeeping notes as we go for lunch. Let's aim to be back here at 2 p.m. so that we can have our breakout sessions. Please let me note that the afternoon sessions are closed sessions for affiliates and our invited guests. We will be back here for a minute to be told about the breakout groups that we'll be going to and what are the research questions that we'll be addressing in those groups. And then we'll be using the rooms upstairs and some of them will be here, all right? Oh, sorry, one more thing. At lunchtime, our volunteers, Tony, are you still around? Yes, Tony at the top there, will be finding the affiliates, those who haven't taken their mug shots. Those who haven't taken their headshots, please make sure you find Tony and Kukwa and get your headshots done before we come back at 2, okay? Bon appetit!